मेरी नाइट
One second. I can't tell if it can see you. Yeah, it can see you.
Hello everybody. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about trauma, how it works, the effects on the brain, the whole nitty-gritty. So I'm going to start this off by letting you all know that 70% of all adults in the United States, that means 70% of us, which I think is probably like 4 or 5, has experienced a traumatic experience at some point in their life. So, it's something that's very common, which makes it very important to understand. My interest was piqued because, as most of us know, I was recently in a car accident, so it was just kind of interesting to me to learn about the ways my brain responds and how it impacts my body. So I'm going to be talking about the big spectrum and the way that the brain responds, which is by either completely shutting down or completely being overactive. It's like kind of two different extremes, but they both got reasons that I think will make a lot more sense once you kind of understand them a little bit further. So today I'm going to be talking about the different types of trauma, or like the different ways you can categorize them, because it is very broad, the signs and symptoms that you may experience after experiencing a traumatic event, and a little bit of the beginning of why these symptoms are experienced because of the chemistry, kind of what's going on in your brain. So my first point, I'll start by explaining trauma altogether. Trauma is just an umbrella term for an event or an experience that is extremely stressful, overwhelming, invokes a lot of fear in somebody, and kind of overwhelms their ability to cope in a normal way. There's two different really big categories in my mind. There's physical, something that kind of injures you externally more than emotionally. So this would be like abuse, which is also very emotionally traumatic, injury, war. All of these kind of go hand in hand between physical and emotional trauma, but these are going to have a little bit more effects on your health. Like mine, I was in a car accident, I was pretty injured. This is an example of this would be from the book The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. He references a veteran from Vietnam who experienced really violent flashbacks and outbursts towards the people that they loved after their experience in the war, which just kind of shows how your brain can really be hijacked into experiencing these really intense emotions. And emotional trauma is going to be more on the side of neglect, losing a loved one, or witnessing something that was, just very hard to see. And it's going to have more of an effect on your emotional ability to process your day-to-day life. An example used in the same book, The Body Keeps the Score, is a lady who experienced sexual abuse and then went through the rest of her life having a really difficult time with romantic partners, but she had no memory of this abuse, so she had really no reason that she could come up with as to why she struggled so much to really bond with somebody in that way. So now I'm going to move on to kind of some of the symptoms. So mainly you're going to hear about, with trauma, you're going to hear about PTSD and acute stress disorder, which is basically PTSD's younger sister. So as my therapist explained it, acute stress disorder is basically PTSD with less intense experiences, and you have to have it for up to 6 months to be officially diagnosed with PTSD. But all of PTSD and acute stress disorder together are both going to make you a lot more susceptible to substance dependence, difficulty sleeping, concentrating, making friends, just functioning on a day-to-day basis. Some of the signs can show up to months later after the event. Some people don't experience PTSD, flashbacks, any of that until years after they experience whatever event triggered their emotional response. Symptoms that are going to come with PTSD and both acute stress disorder as well are going to include, being numb to typical emotions, feeling very restless, anxious, irritable, having a really hard time concentrating, like I mentioned. A lot of times this goes hand in hand with kind of like a head trauma. You might have difficulty remembering, you might have difficulty, kind of thinking through things, and having a lot of flashbacks, which can be really debilitating for people. The main areas of the brain, I'm going to talk about now how these symptoms kind of manifest in the body, but the main areas that are affected in trauma are going to be your prefrontal cortex, your amygdala and your hippocampus. And it also, stressful events are going to lead to higher cortisol and norepinephrine levels, which are going to make you really feel that stress a lot more. So information passes through your prefrontal cortex, which is kind of your rational, logical thinking brain, and it kind of, takes in everything that you witness and breaks it down for you. And it's going to go right through that and straight to your amygdala, which is your fight or flight kind of fear response center of your brain. So you're going to feel that intense fear, and you're not going to have any way to regulate it because your prefrontal cortex is just not doing its thing right now. So this extreme stress kind of hijacks your prefrontal cortex and kind of suspends it, and it just doesn't want to function. So your amygdala is going to respond to whatever trigger is in front of you, and it is going to respond very dramatically. It is also going to increase your stress hormones, cortisol and norepinephrine, which are very, they're stress hormones. They're not really beneficial to your body. Nobody likes to feel stressed. But it also, if you might not know, cortisol is fatal to the cells in your hippocampus, which is your memory center of your brain. So a lot of people don't remember their traumatic events, and there have been studies that have found that this is due to the higher levels of cortisol just repeatedly attacking these cells in your hippocampus and kind of killing that memory. And there was even a study done found that people with very serious and persistent PTSD actually have smaller hippocampi, and so they just their brain, their memory center is just not really working as well as everybody else's. So these are just kind of some of the reasons that these crazy symptoms are experienced, and I think it is very important to have kind of an understanding of how, why, and what you're dealing with when you are dealing with a traumatic experience, because so many people do go through it and so many people do have to rebuild from it. So just to refresh your guys' memories, today I did talk about the different types of trauma, the different signs and symptoms that kind of accompany these traumas, and the very basic surface level reasons why some of these symptoms are experienced. Thank you.